then people try to translate him into a politician, that's where you see the disconnect, and he's this and he's that. He's no different than he was in 1980. He's just getting the outrage up in the entertainment field in the plugging of things. And then behind the scenes being more the business mentality. You hear it from people saying, well, behind closed doors, even Bill Maher, behind closed doors, he's this way. And in front of the camera, he's this way.
Yep.
Because just like in Hollywood, you have your Hollywood persona and then you have the behind closed serious.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I need to know, Ribbon, how do you want me to introduce you?
I mean, you can just, I mean, Ribbon from Texas. I'm not comfortable like giving my last name and stuff like
Okay.
that.
No, Ribbon from Texas. Can I say you're political can I say from the right or from the left
I
or?
mean, I'm kind of more of an independent, but yeah, I'm a
Okay.
conservative because I'm a tax strategist, so I can't tell people to give the
I'm
government
just
any
I'll
money.
say, all right, conservative from Texas. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Andres, this is
Yes.
what we're gonna do. We're gonna do issue one's gonna be Charlie Kirk. Is this America? We're gonna go around the horn on that.
Hmm.
Issue two is gonna be hostile rhetoric. We're gonna
Oh,
talk about from the left and the right. We're gonna talk about Pritzker, Omar, then we're gonna talk about Charlie Kirk. We're gonna talk about Trump.
mhm.
Three, we're going to go into crime, and we're going to talk about state and local funding for law enforcement as
Yeah.
opposed to federal government
Right, right,
funding,
right.
which is going to lead into point four, the National Guard.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we got it all pretty much
Awesome.
covered. Okay, so I'm going to get ready. I'm going to let everybody in, and we're going to get ready to start. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Step into Cafe Americana. Thank you for joining us on this Sunday morning, September 14, 2025. I'm your host, Professor Kenny. Our panel today is Ribbon from Texas. She's a conservative. We have Alan from Tallahassee, Florida, who is, I would say, a Republican from the right. And then we have our um, our friend Andres Dobriansky, who is international affairs person. He's a specialist, international affairs specialist, and he's going to lend some insight into what's going on today. So we've had a rough week. So issue one, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Is this America? Alan, what do you say?
Absolutely not America. 100% not America. The things that have happened this week have really affected me, have made me do some reflection. Um, I'm gonna try to take the good qualities that Charlie espoused of God, family, country, and do a better job myself with that. It's made me do some self-reflection. Um, and I'm going to continue to carry his message. I'm going to do it my way. I want to do a peace, love, and understanding, but peace, love, and understanding with mean right hook if you cross me. So um, that's going to be my message and how I'm going to try to live out Charlie's legacy of talking about God, family, country, and the Constitution and American values. Political assassination is not America, and anyone who celebrates it, you're gonna get a right cross from me because celebrating someone's death is not cool. Done.
Andrzej Dobriansky.
I think from an objective perspective, we've had political violence from our very starting. We've had political violence from our revolution. If you want to talk about people having the freedom of speech, you can go back to Alexander Hamilton dueling and getting shot for the words he said. Numerous presidents have been shot and killed. I'm going to say that this is America if we want to address the problem and get to a better place. I think that in a week, on a day that Charlie Kirk got shot and a school shooting had to interrupt the news coverage, and then we have almost completely ignored that school shooting in our mass media coverage. The deputy sheriff there said that they kept expanding the crime scene because they had no idea about how many bullets were expended in that school, and every piece of equipment and lockers that were shot, it just added to the extent of the crime scene. We are a dangerous country. We have had periods where we have gotten less politically violent against each other, but McKinley, Lincoln, you go through the list. We are a politically violent country.
I agree 100%. Ribbon.
Good morning. We have not had a political assassination in this country since 1968. And we can talk about school shootings, but let's be candid with today's society. As Andre said, school shootings now are becoming desensitizations because how often do they happen? I don't think that what happened to Charlie Kirk is a surprise, considering the escalation of violent rhetoric, because now words are violent, and especially after what happened to the CEO of a health insurance company and seeing the reactions from that. I think the fact that we have turned words into violence and words having consequences of death have become something that we need to reevaluate as a society. I think that looking at Charlie Kirk's situation, that's more of an attack on freedom of speech and religion. And you're showing a bunch of kids, they better shut their mouths if they don't align. You have professors and teachers more so than the students, and faculty writing letters saying, let's restrict, and these people can't come on campus to speak their minds and have honest conversation, peaceful discourse in order to try to resolve these problems. And we wonder why then it leads to violence.
Yes, I
It's
agree with
about
you.
time that these intellectual elites start putting their intellect into wisdom, because again, as I've said before, what good is all of this intellect if we don't know how to put it into practice?
Totally agree. And from my experience on campus as a college professor, it's the word elite kind of sticks out for me because it becomes this idea that we don't need to debate the right. Because my experience on campus is that, it's mostly left. It's left leaning. The faculty, and I'm talking about the faculty, I'm not talking about the students. The faculty is left leaning, and they kind of dismissed her. You can't even have a debate. In fact, the other day when this Charlie Kirk thing happened, um, I went into the office and a colleague who's the secretary there, he's very good, really good guy, but he's left leaning. He's gay. He when I mentioned about Trump trying to bring Trump's not capable of bringing the country together, but I had brought up the Kirk thing, which I don't normally get into these things. He immediately raised his hand like we don't want to discuss this, So you can't even have a discussion on that side. And Ribbon, you're 100% correct, unless they're willing to do what Charlie Kirk was doing, which is trying to debate younger students or engage younger people into a debate. We're not gonna get anywhere, and it's really unfortunate. Okay, leading back now, issue 2, hateful rhetoric. Charlie Kirk was known for inflammatory rhetoric. Okay, we can't deny that. When Trump came down the stairs in 2015, calling Mexicans rapists and murderers, that's hateful rhetoric. That set a tone. Okay, but we have people on the left like J.B. Pritzker, billionaire governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, blaming Trump for this act. Ilhan Omar saying that the right is full of shit when it comes to their being upset and talking about free debate. So is this part of America that we can go back and forth and blame each other and still get nowhere? Alan, what do you say?
This is a tough one. I hate the both sidesism going on right now. Well, this side said this and this side said that and this side said this. I'm going more towards the actions and reactions, which, quite frankly, some of the reactions to Charlie Kirk being murdered in front of all of our eyes is disgusting and reprehensible. I spoke with my daughter yesterday. I was like, when you see people's actions and tell them what they think of you, because, when people are celebrating Charlie Kirk being shot in the neck and, making drinks in bars called neck shots in San Francisco now and saying he got what he deserved and not ever watching one of his videos, well, you've shown me who you are. I know who you are. I know what's in your heart. Um, I think um, while Trump speaks very forcefully and he says some things that, I shake my head at, um, he's not calling for people to be killed. He's saying lunatic left. He says things like lunatic left. I'm being called a fascist. I'm being called a Nazi. So in people who don't know me's eyes, who look at me and see a big dumb guy with a beard, they're like, oh, this guy's a Nazi when I'm wearing my red hat, not knowing I'm a practicing Jew, that I don't associate with Nazis, that I honor women, I honor my daughter, I raise her right. Um, no one knows this about me, but I'm being labeled a Nazi. So someone on the street can just come shoot me in the head because I have a Trump hat on. That's what's happened now. So while I can acknowledge that people on the right have said inflammatory things, I'm not labeling someone with something that dehumanizes them. And that's my biggest problem right now. So um sorry I'm rambling. I'm
Yep,
very hot
that's
on this
okay. That's
issue.
fair. That's
Um,
fair. Andres.
Just like Alan, I've spent a fair amount of my time being labeled a Nazi. Sure. There was plenty of people when Ukraine got invaded in 2014, especially without the beard and the blonde hair. A lot of comments on CNN and other places. Is this guy looking too Aryan for you? Um, as far as the political rhetoric now, we see a market change in terms of especially this administration, the way it's attack first, not come together. And we'll just point out the other living presidents put out statements that were in stark contrast to what the president said from the White House and what the entire administration team put out after, not calling for calm and bringing down the rhetoric. In fact, I think the best kind of leadership we saw was from Governor Cox. I think everybody's in agreement that Utah's governor did a phenomenal job, not just explaining things, but also putting context, bringing spiritual context for people within his speeches, understanding that we're better than this, which is imploring us, because again, I do contend that we are a politically violent nation, and through the past, if we look at it, we know that it is because Ribbon point out that 68 was the last assassination, but there have been plenty of attempts before then. After then, sorry, we
Yes.
had Squeaky Frum, we had it just goes down the list, including pipe bombs just recently throughout the last 10 years. But when we look at a lot of those people just come out to be people who wanted to meet Jodie Foster. A lot of those people were people who were talking to voices in their heads, especially the Charles Manson types, or inspired by him, etc. I think what we're always worried about is whether the rhetoric uh, directly influences those attempts. And if Ribbon says, and I agree, that we're becoming desensitized to all these school shootings or mass shootings, that we're not even taking a moment to pause for a week, etc. When something like that happens, maybe that means that the political rhetoric then actually becomes political violence. But I think at this point we're still not there. I do contend that we are becoming a little bit more comfortable with politically violent rhetoric from our elected officials. That's not right, from whatever side it comes from. So we're playing with fire. How about that? We're coming right up to the edge.
I agree 100%, and I firmly believe, and I've said this in the past, Dan Turrentine is 100% right when he says it's on both sides, and he's getting yelled at by Sean, and he's getting shut down by Mark. It's not fair. It's on both sides. Now, the right can say whatever they want, in terms of what happened. What we do have to take into consideration, and I'm going to borrow from old people, Stephen A. Smith, who was on News Nation the night this happened, and Stephen A. Smith basically summed it up right. He's like, what people don't understand with Charlie Kirk's rhetoric, it's irrelevant to the fact that he got shot and killed. His life was taken away, a married man with two young children. Okay, and Charlie Kirk wasn't running around with a Nazi stormtrooper boots and a swastika on his head. Yes, he said some inflammatory things, but we have to take good with bad. And the good was being able to go to these college campuses and get young people interested in politics and interested in a debate. So that is something that we have to keep into consideration. Ribbon, your comment on this hateful rhetoric and what's going on in this country.
Well, I would say that's a product of where we are in allowing and not requiring more from of journalistic integrity. This goes into the broader scope of let's take out certain words, let's have headlines and take everything out of context if it fits my argument and my narrative and can reinforce some additional groupthink. Groupthink leads to narrow-mindedness. So when you look at what he says, you can take, I mean, Andre, I think that Trump could have come out, and unless he said, let's violently go after them again, that is the only time that the Democrats would say, oh, we need to have peace, because nothing Trump says in any capacity is going to tone down anything. It will inflare one side or the other. It's the same thing with Pelosi. It's the same thing with the ones who have been out the loudest. Utah's effective because, yes, that's just his personality and his character, but he's also doesn't have a national skin in any game where someone has well, what about isms with him? Because that's where we're always going now. We are like, people can relate to this. You're in a horrible relationship and you're trying to break up and you're fighting with each other and you're going to interrupt each other and you're only listening to answer and respond. You're not listening or hearing them to actually listen to what they have to say. So until the rhetoric calms down and people can say, I'm going to show grace in listening to what you have to say and see where we can find commonality in what you are saying, until we can actually stop before we go on the attack of, well, what about this? Until you can say, you know what, I agree with X, Y, and Z of what you're saying. However, these are the parts where we need to work it out. We're not going to get anywhere because it's just the Super Bowl game, just waiting to see which team is going to have to punt next with the next screw up.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm going to stay on this a little bit longer. This incident, this Charlie Kirk assassination, do we believe this is a watershed moment that's going to bring us all together, or are we still going to see more violence in relation to this? Alan?
I hope it can be a watershed moment. I pray it can be a watershed moment, but I I don't I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. There's too many, Aaron talked about political cleavage the other day. I won't get too in the weeds on it, but no side is going to to cede to the other side saying, we have responsibility. They're going to stay in this Cold War, keep pointing the fingers until one side waves the white flag. And, to me, in my opinion, I don't think the left has any moral high ground to stand on anymore. And I mentioned earlier about the people celebrating Charlie Kirk's death. The people making these snide comments, making the TikTok videos, the people who have lost their jobs um, over these remarks. Um, I haven't heard one prominent Democrat talk to those people. You don't have to like agree with Charlie Kirk. You don't have to do whatever, but like they should be telling those people not to be celebrating. And their silence is to me tells me everything I need to know where they're at. Because if they can't condemn that, if they can't condemn people celebrating someone's death, you know, I don't want it. I don't really want you at the table to help me put this country back on track because you want me dead. You want everyone who disagrees with you dead, if you can celebrate that. Again, like I'm very hot on the issue, so
Yep.
my position might shift in the next week or so, but this is where I'm at after taking in all the information that I've seen right now.
Okay. Andres, what do you have to say?
It's a very difficult moment, and there's a lot of eliding of different things. You know, we all condemn people bringing up Charlie Kirk's rhetoric as an excuse for we all here. Sorry, and I hope most faith-believing people condemn people who try to combine his words as a justification for his death. Uh, but that does not mean that his words do not impact his legacy, especially as pertains to him receiving a Presidential Medal of Freedom, the different kind of honors that he is likely to receive around the country. He has a legacy of more so than probably people from earlier generations, just because of the video content of just putting out word after word after word. That is problematic, to say the least. You can also look at his legacy of collecting lists of people for people to target, and those people's stories are coming out more. The way they were called, emailed, confronted in person on a daily basis with slur words, with death threats against them. This isn't a justification. This is a second question, which is what is the legacy of Charlie, which will have to be dealt with. Somebody rightfully pointed out, as you just mentioned, Professor Kenny, that Charlie was known for debating college kids, going into the arena, as he said. But at a certain point, when you're a 31-year-old man with two kids, what are you still doing debating college kids? There's a next generation behind him that was already developing. Many people who were kind of sought him as a mentor, but Charlie in the next 10 years in a different world would have been a different person. And the real tragedy is that he probably would have renounced a lot of the things that he had said in the past, but he doesn't get to do that. I'm not saying because he would change as a person, but he would probably be confronted with a lot of the statements, like saying that empathy is a new age concept, or things like that. And he would say, you know what, I was probably talking extemporaneously there. But that's his legacy now. So it's complicated when you have somebody who's that prominent with that many words out there, and then to try to understand what the legacy of that person is going to be. But I think just like we're separating his words from the heinous attack that we all here agree that political violence, any kind of violence like that, is unacceptable and should be rightfully condemned. And I agree with Alan that we condemn the people who are celebrating this as well. To a person, I don't know if they're listening to Chuck Schumer, but whoever does have an influence on them should talk to them to their face personally about the fact that they're not comfortable with that, and that's wrong. But at the same time, there will be the legacy conversation that goes on for a long time after this.
Yeah, and before I bring Ribbon in to handle this, I find it kind of fascinating on two levels. You know, the treatment Kirk's been getting the last few days, since his assassination. I mean, a lot of it has to do is that we watched it. It's like Kennedy. We watched it. You know, although Kennedy you didn't see till 1975, by the way. And I teach that in one of my film classes because I showed the Zapruder film. So we didn't, and as America, he was killed in 1963. We didn't get to see the Zapruder film till 1975. Charlie Kirk, we got to see within an hour, right? And it was very gruesome. We saw the neck wound, the blood, everything, right? So that's one aspect of this. But it's raised him to a level, you know, we're talking Presidential Medal of Freedom, we're talking, you know, lying in state was discussed, stopping Congress for a prayer, all of this stuff. And I'm not trying to put Charlie Kirk down. In fact, the opposite is what, like when we had Chris on the other day, he said, I didn't know who Charlie Kirk was. Yeah, because you are not paying attention to what's going on the internet in full.
Yeah.
You know, like you are paying attention, but you don't realize the movement. And by the way, I wasn't a Charlie Kirk follower, but when I was on YouTube, his shorts popped up all the time, right? Consistently. And then when you do some investigating and say, you know, I know, and like when I would go to my mother's house, my mother's a super right-wing person, so she's got Newsmax running 24/7, and there's Charlie Kirk on. So you know he got Trump elected. Okay, he got Trump elected. All right, if he wanted, because that youth vote never comes out for Republicans, and they did this time. So I would argue he got Trump elected. So it's an interesting thing because you have like our martyrs, like Dr. King and RFK and JFK, are considered our American martyrs who were assassinated. Abraham Lincoln, and now we have Charlie Kirk, and I'm not trying to make fun of it. I'm just saying, because of internet and because of social media and that rise, you know, he's had more followers than probably all of those people put together. You know what I'm saying, on the internet. So I can understand. Martin Luther King, Charlie Kirk. You might say historically what, but if you analyze it, yeah, this guy had some juice, you know, and so you know, it's just an interesting. And then his wife coming on. I'm sorry, Ribbon, that I'm keep going on here, but his wife the other day coming on and giving that speech, she's, you know, and it was interesting because me and Jackie were watching. Jackie's a Democrat, and she started getting upset with her. You know, that tone and that kind of rhetoric, you know, the fire is lit and all of this stuff. And it's the idea. But I'm like, babe, she's speaking to the turning points people, although subconsciously, or I wouldn't even say subconsciously, although well knowing that this is getting broadcast all over the place. Although I believe MSNBC, Alan, you can interrupt. MSNBC and CNN didn't carry it.
They didn't carry it live.
Yeah, they didn't carry it live, which, by the way, was their right.
Yeah.
Which is their right to do, because I watched it on News Nation, and I even said this is going way too long, you know. So, but I had to take into consideration she was really addressing her turning point people, but she had a little incendiary tone at certain points of her speech that was like, we're not going to give up, you know, we're coming at you worse, you know, more down than ever kind of thing, but with that tone, not like, hey, we're going to regroup, we're going to come together, and we're going to elevate to another level. It was, we're coming at you, you know. So this kind of stuff is interesting, and it's, you know, Charlie Kirk is up on this level that I don't know if it can be reconciled with older people, I'll say. So just having said that, I'm sorry, Ribbon, address the this idea of, is this going to get worse or better, or, you know, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, first, I'd like to address, I'm glad that Andre brought up as an example the New Age empathy order. And I could not be more on board with that statement from Charlie Kirk, because there's a huge difference between empathy and sympathy. And there's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Not very many people can empathize with Erica Kirk right now, but they sure can sympathize with her right now. And using the word empathy so easily and flippantly in that context is basically saying that you feel, you know exactly how I feel when. Well, no, you don't. And as far as this being a watershed moment, I would say you can look at the marches in the UK, South Korea. What's the new chant now? I am Charlie Kirk. He was the one who introduced Vance to Trump. and he got out the youth vote. And he's bringing religion back into people's lives. And that's more what he was advocating than the politics. I mean, he just said something about it. How do I want to be remembered? Courage for my faith.
Yes.
And when Erica was speaking the other night, well, I don't blame her. If somebody just shot and assassinated my husband, I'd be pretty pissed off too. And there's nothing worse than a woman scorned. And that doesn't mean it has to be violent, because there weren't riots and there weren't looting and there hasn't been a whole bunch of injustices going out in the street because of what happened to him. They're not taking it out on anybody else in violence. So 18,000 plus people have already emailed into Turning Point to start a chapter in their college or their high school or their school. And you have people with the same kind of understanding of what Charlie Kirk was trying to say. I didn't really pay much attention to him, but I understood what his movement. And he catapulted a lot of people up, and he's got a lot of people behind him to continue to push on his mission. I think his mission was more of individuality rather than groupthink and narrow-mindedness. And you have to be compassionate and be willing to accept everybody, agree to disagree,
Yeah.
but you don't have to name call and attack people and think they're horrible people just because they don't have the same point of view as you do. Their point of view may be different because their entire life experiences and exposures to things were different. And you have to show grace in that.
100%. That's very fair.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I've mentioned my daughter. My daughter's 19, and my daughter's probably center left. She reluctantly voted for Trump because she didn't like Biden and Harris's position on Israel. So, that was her voting thing. But we talked yesterday. We talked, and she said a lot of her friends who are left leaning now are not leaning left anymore because of this. Um, so I listen to her. I mean, like I said, I don't have a poll, I don't have a study, I don't have a Pew Research to like wave in everyone's face, but I have my daughter and 10 of her friends, telling her this does not sit well with them, and
Yeah.
they're left leaning. So
What I would say about that is I would say, yes, that's now. But, if we're thinking politically and we're always thinking about the midterms, because that's in that big election, I still think the midterms are long enough away for the Democrats, if they can, and I don't know if they can, to get their footing. Like Frank likes to say, all politics is local, and if they they could still have some way. I told Dan Turntine that between this Charlie Kirk shooting and Mondami becoming mayor of New York City, which looks like that's going to happen, that's a double whammy right now on the Democratic Party. But there's still time. There's still things can change. Trump could screw things up within weeks. You never know. So it's just and I'm only talking politically now.
yeah.
So now we're going to transition a little bit into crime itself. And I'm going to make my statement about crime, and then we're going to go around. My biggest problem when it comes to these crime issues is it just seems to me that, like a J.B. Pritzker blaming Trump, or Washington, or the Washington D.C. situation where Trump brought in the National Guard. There seems to be like a blame on Trump and the federal government on, well, you cut the budget, so we can't hire police or whatever. Hold on. Hold on. You have a state, you have a city, you have a state budget, a city budget, and you have to figure out how to budget that stuff to make sure you have enough law enforcement to handle your quote unquote shit, right? The problem is this: as Americans, we all want lower taxes, right? When you say, well, I go to work, I pay too much taxes, I want lower taxes. Okay, we're going to cut the budget, we're going to lower your taxes. Well, you know what that means? You're going to have less firemen, you're going to have less police on the street, and your crime's going to go up, and your fire prevention's going up. All of those essentials you need. And I'm a New Yorker. Andres is a New Yorker. We see it every day. If you don't put focus on that, your crime rate is going to be a big problem. In a place like New York City, um, it's always going to be a problem regardless. Okay, because it's just such a huge city, just like LA, these huge Chicago, these huge cities. But um, if you don't, if your city is having a problem with crime, if your crime rates are high, like Memphis, right, which is one of the top, well, where is your budget? Where is your allocation for law enforcement, and what is your leadership doing to prevent this stuff? And by the way, I just want to point out a little thing. I don't know if anybody saw Jasmine Crockett recently on one of her things. She said police aren't there to prevent crime. They're there to arrest people, which is the dumbest thing I ever
No,
heard.
to investigate
Yeah,
crime.
yeah, and without ever even reading what their credo is when they raise their hand to become a police officer, usually it's like to protect and serve the public, And she just kind of, said, no, that's not what they're there to do. So, let's go around the horn. So I'm going to change it up how I go. I'm going to call him Ribbon first. Ribbon, what do you think about how law enforcement should be funded and taken care of at a state and local level as opposed to federal government?
Well, the federal government doesn't have anything to do with it at state and locally other than writing them the check, and then they get to figure out how they want to allocate that out. So I
Right.
would, um, you know, I hate to agree with Jasmine Crockett, but police do not prevent crime, they deter crime. There's a difference in word choice again. So they're not going to be there they can't predict where and when a crime is going to occur and take place. They're usually there after the fact, but if their presence is there, they're less likely to commit those crimes. You have to be able to have a law and judicial system that's going to be able to support those cops, because at some point with those cops, it gets to, well, it's not worth me even filling out the paperwork. They're going to be back on the street before I'm even done filling out all the paperwork. And so it's multifaceted, and they're going to have to decide between the local and the state how they want to handle their crime and what they are and are not willing to put up with. And that's for the citizens to decide. But again, with defunding the police, you can't allocate resources to civil officers that don't have any, that don't even carry any weapons, and figure that that's going to deter any crime. Who's that's going to scare? And peace officers coming to domestic violence disputes and having counselors coming to these things. This is unrealistic expectations and putting a lot of additional strain on law enforcement, and it's
100%.
unnecessary. And a lot of it comes back to we as society have to start policing ourselves as well as expecting police to police us. If we don't want police policing us, then we have to have responsibility of policing ourselves in a civilized society. Don't shoot people. Don't steal stuff that doesn't belong to you. Don't accost people on the street, and go out and be a productive member of the society. It's not hard, and there's no excuses for it. There are enough services and providers of services in nonprofit organizations and in government services that can help you in these situations. And
Right.
the poverty stricken have easier access to getting those benefits than, say, a middle class person who lost their job unexpectedly. Then all of a sudden they don't even qualify for those benefits.
Right. That's fair. The problem is too, though, they don't care when you're talking on that level, they don't care about law enforcement or throwing money towards that at all. I mean, that's a whole different thing.
And,
Also,
and Kenny,
go ahead.
honestly, when you
Yeah,
come down to this and they say pay cops more, you have to look at what those unions do, and you have to see what the burden of you have to see what the
100%.
burden of those law enforcement budgets are on their unfunded pensions, et cetera, because no one's going to even want to go on the force if they don't think there's going to be money there to pay for their retirement.
Well, I would say in New York City, and because I've had a lot of friends that are police officers, they have like a rule when you retire, they take like your last 3 years of work and they average out what your salary was for those last 3 years, and that's your pension. So
Oh,
what a
they'll also
cop's
add any unused vacation days
Yeah,
and sick
100%.
days
But
and
so
all of
so
that
what
stuff.
they do, what these cops do in their last 3 years, they work overtime like you wouldn't believe. because they want their 150, like, you know, if you're a 20-year cop, you're making 150,000 easy. So you want to get that up to $210,000, you know, and then retire with that kind of pension, and a lot of this overtime is just, you know, baloney overtime. So
So talking about funding of police, it's all of those things that the devils are in the details, and a lot of stuff that most people don't even consider when you're looking at those things.
yeah.
So
And
how are you
to
going to get recruitment and morale too?
Right. Right. 100. But you know what? That's the thing, though. Like, I know in posters in New York City, when they're recruiting for the police, they'll say your starting salary is, you know, it used to be 40,000. Now it's probably closer to 50. I haven't, you know, I don't know what the latest sign says. So you take a 22-year-old kid, a 21-year-old kid who's working in, you know, Walmart or whatever, and you say, dude, take the test, become a cop, and instead of making, you know, 15 bucks an hour, you're going to make 50,000 just to start. And you got to pretend in 20 years you can retire. You're 20, well, at 40 I can retire, you know, 45 I can retire. That's an incentive. That's an incentive. So another thing, just one thing with Jasmine Crockett, she never said deter either. She was said
Okay,
arrest. They must arrest. That's their job, is to
well,
arrest.
that's way down the line from.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's another problem, which you brought up, Ribbon, which you're 100% right. Also, what about funding for your judicial system? How does that work? You need more judges. You know, and that's a total mess. I have, just a quick sidebar because I was thinking about him today. My former brother-in-law, uh, know him, for, you know, 25, was murdered a couple of years ago in Brooklyn, coming out of a bodega, you know, buying his lottery tickets, coming out 72nd Street and 13th Avenue in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, and this guy hit him from behind, knocked him down, and kicked his face in. And the guy was, you know, I went to the hospital that night. He was in a coma for 3, 4 days, and then they pulled the plug and he died. So he was murdered, and they caught the guy. This guy had already murdered somebody in the past and got out, and now and I'm talking almost 3 years ago. This guy still hasn't been brought to trial yet. So this is what, you know, this is another problem we have with the judicial system and how it works. All right, so sticking with the crime thing, I'm going to say Andres for last. Alan, what do you have to say?
I'm gonna go in a sort of different direction because I read an article about the Soviet Union when the Communist Revolution happened. They let everyone out of the prisons, right? They let the criminals out. The criminals started acting what criminals do: kill, rape, pillage, murder, steal, all that stuff. Then the communists put in judges that just kept re-releasing the people. And this is parallel to what's going on right now with crime is, you know, it's a revolving door where, you know, the judges are letting everyone out. We're releasing criminals, cashless bail. Um, so we need to look back in history and really take this seriously. Like we need to stop crime. Um, to the federal government, you know, they control the purse strings for this, as Ribbon mentioned, you know, like make there be conditions. If you don't want to fight crime, you figure it out, or we're gonna figure it out. And if we figure it out, that means we're gonna send in the National Guard, we're gonna have FBI agents there, and you're gonna deal with the consequences. Um, Again, like we need to take the gloves off. We need to fix it, and stop this epidemic that's going on right now. Again, I'm very hot right now, so my opinions may be a little forceful and extreme right now, but you know, this is a problem, especially when I saw that parallel between uh, Russia during the Communist Revolution, emptying their prisons, and seeing what's going on now. You know, history repeats itself.
Okay. I'm going to call on Andres last, but before he starts, I'm going to ask people, start raising your hands if you have any questions you want to ask stuff. Raise your hands and you'll be brought in. Andres, take
Uh,
us home.
just want to point out that a lot of good people were released after the revolution, including my grandfather. So,
Probably one of my relatives too. So,
so there was a revolution that a lot of forces were involved in, and then there was the Red-White War where the communists were fighting against each other, and also then they were consolidating by trying to take over the areas that the Russian Empire had on top of it. But let's talk about crime and punishment, not to use another metaphor from that part of the world. So many of us have interactions with law enforcement. Personally, work with NYPD counterterror, state troopers of New York, and the New York FBI office. I used that experience when people had issues during the Black Lives Matter, during other anti-police protests, and to a person, I said, I can't. Every person I've ever met with or worked with was of the highest standard. I'm sure there are bad people out there, but I can just tell you with my experience who these people is. And same this way. I've never interacted with law enforcement where I didn't think that they were doing the best of their job. And I don't think any one of us who've interacted with law enforcement from the opposite side of their job would say that this country is lax in any way from the local, state, or federal level in terms of prosecuting people and finding a way to right the wrongs. We need more help there. They need more judges, like Professor Kenny said. Sure, they need a lot more things, funding, etc. But at the same time, I've mentioned this on other discussions. We are the most incarcerated country in the world, and so we need to start thinking of other ways of addressing this. I think a lot of our discussion here since the Charlie incident, as well as others throughout the incident in Charlotte, other crime things that we've had to discuss, I think a lot of people realize that from the left and the right that there needs to be something better about addressing mental instability in this country that we have turned away from. We have purposely slashed a lot of the funding for that kind of mental health options for people. I don't think they're easy to get to. They're not at all. In fact, we're going to go through a healthcare crisis in this country with the legislation that was just passed and future legislation, unless they fix it, in terms of a lot of people losing their Medicare Advantage starting next month, a lot of people losing access to Medicaid, and the more people get into financial crises, the more the crime rate will rise. So there's a lot of needs that the government needs to address. Lord knows how that's going to happen, but we're going to have that conversation going forward. In the end, though, when we're talking about crime, I'll finish with the last with another callback to my comments about what happened in Charlotte, which is a lot of the pro-prosecution rhetoric and initiatives that are being sponsored now led by the White House will end up biting us just as much as the Homeland Security stuff did after 9/11. A lot of that legislation was used against the people in January 6th, which I know people in this community and others have an issue with. The way the government gets to prosecute you, what access they have to, and that's because of anti-terror laws. And very similarly, I've had to do a lot of appearance about the killing in Charlotte. Of those 14 times that person with schizophrenia was not arrested but interacted with police, there were speeding tickets there. Another is making false statements on 911. Another one was threatening people. All of those things are actions in a libertarian country that a lot of people would defend the full right of if the person wasn't mentally ill. And so if we start pushing on the side of more prosecution because of any kind of infraction, I think that's just going to bite people in the end, whether it's 5 or 10 years. We saw this in the aftermath of 9/11. We saw this in the aftermath of Watergate. A lot of stringent oversight. It took Bill Clinton, after Bill Clinton, for us to finally get rid of the special prosecutor statute that everybody agreed just went way too far. And I think we're at the dawning of a too far because we're probably going to step on the gas like we always do. And this is just what happens. We never go moderate. It's like if we need to address a problem, we're going to go full to the wall and then we'll address it. And maybe we take off too many things next and we end up in this cycle. But that's just something that we should be mindful of. And I'm sure there's going to be debates if there's actually any federal legislation passed for law enforcement going forward.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. The overcorrection on both sides, left and right, is just it just keeps us divided. And I agree with you, Andres. The idea that we can pass these laws, and now if I jaywalk, you know what I mean, and I could go to jail, I get it. I mean, that's the sentiment. That's
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
idea behind it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just we do have to be careful
But
because both
Professor,
sides use it.
it's not jaywalking in and of itself. It's if you have political speech,
Right.
then you're pulled in and they said, "Hey, I saw you jaywalk." You know,
Jaywalking,
that's a 5-year
100%.
minimum now, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I get exactly what you're saying. Yeah, and we do have to recognize that, you know. And look, you know, when Trump got elected the second time, you know, the idea is like, oh, I'm not going to go after my enemies. Well, what is you know what I mean? So, I mean, it is what it is. I understand he's pissed off and whatever, but his overcorrection and he has some point to it because it was like the overcorrection on the left impeded him. So now but his overcorrection is now, you know, something that's, you know, it's not good for the country, and I agree with you there. So Kelly wanted to get in, and I don't know if she just wants to rub it in our face that she has Josh Allen as her quarterback, or if she just wants to comment on what we've been saying before. Go ahead, Kelly. We've opened it up now, so
I won't rub it in yet because there's a lot of season left to go. Okay. And this is Buffalo, right? Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, you guys were talking more about Charlie earlier and the reaction. One of the things that's been the most difficult for me to see and deal with is the number of people commenting that have little to no understanding about what Charlie's beliefs and values were. And just how many, you know, that gets put out there, you know, a clip taken out of context, just what you hear from other people, right? And unless you've kind of watched him, and we can't forget, he was very young. He was only 31, right? So when he started this, when he was like 18, 19,
yep.
Yeah, he's a 18-year-old boy. Like, I don't, he's a boy, right? His beliefs and values did change. And he would comment sometimes, he's a hothead, right? And I don't know who it was that made the point. He doesn't get to correct his earlier positions, but he was not somebody that wouldn't change. Like, he 100%, if you presented him a better understanding or argument, he would be one of the first people to say, you're right. I've got to, you know, I'm willing to change my stance on that. And I think it's in today's day and age. So we have a lot of people in like traditional media didn't really understand him. It's so easy to just call him MAGA and extreme right. He was very much like, believed in, you know, he read a lot about the founding fathers and the original principles, and like the way they're using that, his quote, what he said about the Second Amendment, completely out of context. He never once went around and said, oh, I'm okay with gun death. No, that his conversation was part of a larger context. Somebody said, well, are you okay with any gun deaths or whatever? And they're talking, and he's like, well, sometimes there is an acceptable risk. He's like, 40 to 50,000 people die a year of car accidents or get injured. Do we stop driving? Like, no. So he wasn't saying he was okay with people dying from gun violence. And my fear is that he was going directly to these kids, who some of them, many were already disenfranchised, and kind of heading it off at the pass. But a lot of older people, you might say, really don't understand him, and I think art's just mischaracterizing him. And I've even seen some people on the right not fully understand who he was and the way his reputation and just like making him so Trump adjacent. He was not afraid to call out Donald Trump.
Yes, and he called him out when
Yeah.
he bombed Iran. He called him
Yes.
out.
And he was pushing back on the Epstein list. you know, and the people saying he's homophobic, that I think and you can take clips of him out of context. He was a devout Christian. So, you know, that if you're a devout Christian, that homosexuality doesn't always fly. But his thing was, there's like, I love every soul, right? I welcome. He's like, this is a big tent. We want everyone under it. And the way he interacted with some people. But I just think it's really easy now. And suddenly, like, you see, it's like a game of telephone, right? Somebody posts something and then it escalates. And then you see maybe a politician or a leader saying, you know, his fascist rhetoric, blah, 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 blah. And so, and how many people does that touch that truly have no understanding of who he is or what he is?
Yep, that's fair. Thanks, Kelly.
And Kelly,
Go ahead,
I
Ribbon.
would almost say to the broader point of that is that just goes to show how many more followers in today's society that we have other than individual critical thinkers. And then I will say, I don't think that's going to stop, because just Saturday, Friday, the headline was an ICE agent in California shoots somebody, and they failed to say because he was being dragged by a car.
Chicago,
Those kind of narratives still continue to go that direction. We're going to be in the same place that we're always going to be. And I mean, I guess the message should be for the American people, everybody should start demanding the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Let us decide, and let us be the grown-ups and have enough emotional maturity to make the decisions for ourselves, rather than you telling us how we're supposed to think and telling us what's best for us, and that they know better. Because I've typically found that these intellectual elites and experts seem to be so in their fields that they're so narrow-minded, they don't look at how their piece adds up to the total pie.
Yeah. And when you made that point earlier, that was something I forgot, because it's been a few minutes, that I wanted to say I absolutely believe. And that makes me more concerned. I believe this makes us more vulnerable to escalation and rhetoric escalating into violence, into things that don't belong, because there's so many followers that are just waiting.
Said Charlie was open-minded, and I see Andre nodding his head in agreement that yes, he seemed to be a measured, reasonable individual, and he was assassinated for that.
Yeah.
Here's what. Go ahead, Kelly. Go ahead. Finish.
I was just going to say the last point of that. He was 18 when he started. Who hasn't met an 18-year-old boy that isn't a little passionate? Maybe say some things they regret.
When this Charlie Kirk assassination happened, I did my due diligence, and what I like to do when it comes to people is try and get a feel for how people felt about the person on both sides of the aisle, right?
Yeah.
And I did not see one person from the left who met Charlie Kirk, who hung out with Charlie Kirk, or had say anything bad about him. Now, it's easy not to say something bad about somebody when they've just been assassinated. I get that. But I really felt that these people, like I saw people almost like weeping that were on the left that said, I love Charlie. And I'll give you an example. I don't know if you guys know who Dave Rubin is. Well, Dave Rubin is a married gay man, right? Who was heavily on the left and debated Charlie for 10 years. And talked about how he would go over Charlie's house and have dinner, and they hung out. Like they would find common ground on things. So what I'll say about Charlie Kirk avoiding the politics is that it seemed that people, when they were in his sphere or they met him, they liked him. And that's why there's a lot of anger here. That's why Sean is yelling at Dan. That because there's a lot of inner hurt over the loss of this young man. So I think that's where we're at now. I'm going to bring in Claudio. Come on, my friend. Thank you. And thanks, Kelly. Are you good, Claudio?
No, okay. Because I want to continue from what Kelly said, because also in Europe we are having the same stuff. I'm listening that was a far right, a white supremacist, a fascist, a Nazist. You should not talk about his Christian faith because it's bad to talk about his Christian faith because it will trigger the culture wars. To be honest, I'm tired. Because they started identity politics and they started to say, but the capitalism hasn't any moral defense from himself. I'm getting tired. The time that we do the cultural defense, but you should talk just about the politics. You should just talk about the economy. No, I'm not good with that. I'm sorry. If we are in a classical liberal society, people should be free to express their religion. Is in the First Amendment that it's in the Second Amendment. I think there should be limits on the gun property and this kind of stuff. I'm getting tired of that. It's okay to tell that you are Christian if you are pro-abortion. It's okay to tell you are Christian if you are in favor of the left. It's okay. It's not okay, this kind of stuff. I'm sorry. They tell he's racist. I saw all the friends that Charlie had, mostly were black conservatives. There was also Byron Donalds, if I remember well, Alan, that did an event with him, the representative. So, and they say, no, but it doesn't prove that he's not a racist. Come on. There are far right in America. There is Nick Fuentes. There is that guy stupid called Dan Peters that also Megyn Kelly tell I don't want to stream this guy again that defended the idiot. I don't remember if it was a New York restaurant, but there was this anti-Semite guy that wrote something in a Jew bar and they had issue. There was this Dan Peters defending him. There is David Duke that every time changes sides, which is really a racist. Steve Bannon in part is a racist because it's a social right kind of guy that is influenced by European stuff. In my opinion, the problem is another. First, that the right has a problem. They don't want to invest in human capital, in young people. Charlie Kirk tried that, but there should be more money. Because if people doesn't want just Charlie Kirk, they should have other offers then, if that's the problem of the person, rather than the argument or the ends. And the other stuff, this is also worthy for Europe, because too many times the right has the problem that it was just to invest money on political campaigns. But I'm sorry. As Margaret Thatcher said, you have to battle a fight more than once to win it, which means it cannot just stand to the vote polls. It should be peacefully, of course. And I'm sorry for people who are sick, I don't know if you know that, Gloria Alvarez, they say there should not be any batalha cultural. No, there should be cultural war. But it should not be a cultural war. It should be a cultural discussion. Because being Ukrainian, pro-Ukrainian is American. Be pacifist is American. Be anti-war is American. Being a libertarian is American. Being a progressive is American. And I'm sorry that people say that just some is this and some is that, because it's not true. But the problem is that they want to exclude some people from the discussion, and the exclusive, the one that have been the exclusionists has not been us, have been the others from since the 68s, following some idiots in France inventing postmodernism. That's the reality.
Yeah, I agree with you, Claudio. And we should never exclude anybody from a discussion. Now, what I'll say about that too is, like, some people are like, oh, I can't believe this person said, you know what? People disqualify themselves with what they say. They don't need to be disqualified by, a group or whatever. They self-cancel, quote unquote, which I hate that term. That's one of the reasons why I'm a Republican. I hate that cancel culture. But you know what I'm saying? They self-cancel with their words. People, smart, intelligent people say, I heard what that person has to say. I gave him a fair shot. I gave him my ear. Not on board with that. I move on. You know what I'm saying? They're not in my sphere anymore. I'm not, that kind of thing. So it's, I agree. Everybody should be allowed in the debate. Stephen Holder, how are you? Are you in Vegas or are you back home?
I'm back home.
Did you win any money?
I'm back in the mudroom. Now I lost $20.
That's it? Oh, okay. So then
Yeah,
that's a good trip.
I got a
That's a good
a
trip.
free drink, so it was cool.
Okay, good. What's on your mind?
We went and saw the Wizard of Oz at the Sphere.
Was that a
and
Cirque du Soleil thing, or no? They played the film in the Sphere.
at the yeah,
Oh,
and then
that's
they enhanced
awesome.
it. They like snipped out the characters, and then they enhanced the backgrounds and stuff like that. I was kind of like, yeah, but I was actually very impressed with it. It was very
Awesome.
cool. It was all haptic, the seats vibrated and they blow stuff at you.
Oh, that's awesome.
Flying monkeys flying around the sphere. So
Cool.
It was cool. Anyway, somebody mentioned something, and I don't know if they actually said this or if it just popped up in my head, but this whole both sidesism about the Charlie Kirk thing. And with all the protests, you had 3 million people in London. We've had protests, or I wouldn't even call them protests. I would call them vigils. We've had marches and gatherings and things like that. With both sides doing this being called, where are the riots? I haven't seen any reports of any violence coming out of any of these protests, the Charlie Kirk protests. Am I wrong?
No, you're 100% right, but it's early yet.
Does anybody really believe, honestly, that if it had been a prominent person on the left and there were protests and riots, or protests, that they would not have devolved into riots?
Here's what I'll say about that. And this reminds me, taking me back to the Al Sharpton stabbing in Bensonhurst back in whenever that was, the 80s, I guess. Um, it would depend on the response. Like, for example, if somebody on the left was assassinated, this rhetoric is this discussion is tough. But let's say an Ilhan Omar, I hate to even use names, but let's just say somebody in the Democratic
Sure, I
Party,
understand.
right?
Generic person on the left.
Generic person on the left, prominent Democrat was assassinated, and I definitely believe the left would protest if they felt it was a right-wing person doing it, right? The res where it could get dicey is if Trump decided to send in the National Guard or something because they're concerned about these protests during this person's funeral. You know, and that reminds me of like when Al Sharpton was stabbed in Bensonhurst, he incited this gang to come out, and I lived in Brooklyn at the time, and I'm like, don't even respond to Al Sharpton. Why are you going to this thing? You know, you're looking for trouble. You know how you respond to Al Sharpton? Don't show up. Let him walk down 86th Street in Bensonhurst with nobody watching him, and then you've defeated him. So I think it would be maybe the counter protesters, and then if Trump did something, or so that's where I think that would go.
I disagree. I think that they would, quite honestly, I think they'd never miss an opportunity to burn shit down. And I think that there would be riots and violence throughout the country if it had been somebody on the prominent.
Can I add something,
Stop
Steve?
it. Come on in, Andrij.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think a major factor we should put into your hypothetical is let's not have it be the opposite. Let's say things happen as they did, and we still to this day did not have an arrest. I think then we might have violence from the other side also. One of the things when you bring up Sharpton, Professor Kenny, is longtime huckster. He was very adept at bringing up these things where you can't possibly pin like the Tawana Brawley thing or other stuff.
Right.
All made up, so you can't actually pin something down. And the longer you have no resolution, the more people can get agitated. When the George Floyd stuff went down, people were able to mobilize people because of a lack of arrest. Same thing happened with the Daniel Perry case also. Why was there no arrest? You know, we know in that case, you know, there was a person the public was pinning it on, but why was there no arrest? I think in this case, had there been no arrest immediately, the conspiracy theories would have been flying even more, and we possibly could have had violence. So this is my thing to say. Thank God for law enforcement in this country. Thank God, you know, people know how to do the right thing. But I think the one thing we need to fit in here is the disenfranchisement. If people can put out a sense that justice isn't being served, then riots, you know, spill over into bigger things, as opposed to what we saw this week, which was thank God for this father, you know, doing what he did, and that's really why we're in the place we're in now.
Yeah.
Well, I tend to disagree. I mean, you had the Trayvon Martin protests. You had the kid who was, you know, called inside the cop car and assaulting the cop.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a propensity, and that needs to be purged from the left. They need to say violence is not acceptable, and they need to say that unequivocally and strongly. And anybody dismissing it, you know, you had the Wisconsin first lady saying, wow, she opened up a window so she could smell the burning tires while the city and her town was burning down. That needs to be called out, and not by people like me. It needs to be called out by the people on the left and say, this is unacceptable. We cannot live in a society like this. And I said this before, I lived outside Portland for most of my life. You know, they had 100 days of riots.
Yeah.
100 days, and they rioted just for riot's sake.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
But again, in that instance for Portland, there was nothing specific, which is the huckster thing. The grifter thing is if you have nothing specific you're asking for or doing, then it can go on. So I mean that's the brilliance of a huckster like a Sharpton. He can come up with something that is just generally specific, and people came to the streets and stuff. But if
well,
there's
it wasn't really even a huckster. I don't think anybody was actually out there pushing it. It was just people showing up. And it was part of the reason why is because it was dismissed. They were just like, oh, you know, I mean, I heard this every day. Well, they're mostly peaceful. Well, on the 75th day of a riot, when you show up at a protest, mostly peaceful, you know what's coming after the sun
right,
goes down.
right.
And, you know, I mean, even if finally the mayor finally quit dismissing it after they tried to burn his condo down.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
you guys have a good day.
Thanks,
Steve.
Stephen. All right, Aaron, come on in.
Hey, all right. Well, I spent yesterday fishing, so I didn't have to listen to any kind of chaotic.
And then you watched the
Good
fight
stuff.
last night?
Of course, great fight of the decade, at least, if not last 20 years. And it's on Netflix, so anyone who didn't watch the fight or isn't into boxing, I would recommend you watch it just because it's like a Sugar Ray Leonard or Ali type era fight. But anyways, to the point, because I usually digress already, but you triggered the digression, so it's on you a little bit there, buddy. No. So I brought up political cleavaging, cleavages. I don't think cleavaging is a word, but last week, and I really do think it is sort of fundamental to our conversation, and we're always so tactical because we're obviously in the moment and big events happen, so we get kind of subsumed in them. But you know, if we go back the last 20 odd years and we kind of tallied up, hello? Are you
No,
there?
keep going. Keep going.
Oh, okay. Oh, no. If we tallied up sort of all the massive sort of trust breaking events on really any major political issue and side, whether it was the Iraq invasion, whether it was the global financial crisis and the response, which, you know, triggered both a combination of Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street, which you could almost argue was almost like alien
One and the
Earth
same.
event, right? It was like there was like a landing on both sides, like from that moment. And you could say, well, my side's better or this or that, but you can't deny that there was definitely a co-equal breaking of some sense of trust. And you know, we've had other ones since then, but I would really sort of argue, and you can maybe say the Obama, the election of Obama, election of Trump, but I would almost argue those are it's somewhat downstream, right? I mean, and they're individual people who represent sort of figures, and so you could say, you know, black or white or this or that, but structurally there was just this sense from a lot of people that they can't trust institutions. And the reason that's important is that people, doesn't matter who they are, if they can leverage platforms, you know, and really anywhere in the world, it doesn't really matter, because everyone has their own version of this. And they're really not challenged because fundamentally people sense that, well, there's something fundamentally unfair or wrong, or we were all against or whatever. And it sort of permeates. And I would argue, downstream from these massive sort of events was a change of elite campus culture, right? And then that moved into what I would say is mid-level university campus culture. And that was a big change. Jonathan Haidt goes into it. I mean, he teaches in those environments, and he's pretty explicit, and other people have been. So I do think what someone like Kirk was able to do, and others, almost like in a Huey Long way, for those of you who know who Huey Long was, and he was assassinated also. Yeah, I'm not arguing Kurt had achieved sort of Huey Long dumb, like, you know, he hadn't been elected and all that, but he probably was on a path very similar to that. If we were sort of look back at sort of early Huey Long in his 30s, you'd probably say, probably very similar pattern. Is that they were able to channel whatever rage was on one side, tie it into a set of 5, 10, 15 kind of key continuous reinforcing points of view, and then just pound it in. And that has an effectiveness that, especially in the modern world with technology, it always had an effectiveness. Even in a newspaper, radio, TV era, it had an effectiveness. Today, it's, a million X, right? It's a whole other universe. And I would say someone like Kirk and many others like him, have that ability. I do think that they are a little sui generis, and that, if a 41-year-old Kurt, was around and was 29 when Kurt was 18, probably doesn't click as well, because I think Kurt being on campus, Kurt kind of building this up himself, because he's sort of like Zuckerberg at Harvard with Facebook. Like, he did a proof of concept on his own campus that he was on, right? Like, that was his product, right? And he kind of expanded it from there, and he kept it inside that ecosystem. I mean, obviously other people, from 20 to 8 or 30 to 80 followed him, but his core, we'll call it his core customers, were always this new generation, this new wave of 18 to 23, 24-year-olds. And and obviously, if you were 12 to 17, he didn't have a problem with you, kind of getting on your surfboard and flowing. Or if you were 25 to 75, he didn't care either. But his core group was that. And so in a lot of ways, he sort of was like the product market fit for that. And I don't think you can recreate that. You're going to see a lot of people kind of, I'm going to say grift, but a lot of people kind of try to go into that space, but I don't think they'll be anywhere near as effective. And so I do think he was very, very unique that way. Obviously, his language was charged, but I think in a certain way, trying to create, there's no room in the 18 to 24-year-old space to bring up all the boring history garbage that I like to talk about, or Ribbon or other people. Like, they'd have no interest in this, right? If they did, the kids would be having their own history conversations themselves, and they don't, right? So in the end, you were always going to get charged language in that space. And I do think it's a problem for people over 25 to try to parse his stuff, because he did say a lot of incendiary things. But I also think in that world, it's almost like what he was doing is like a libertarian exercise, where I'm going to just really press gas and say whatever I want to say, and then someone else is going to do that too. And so I almost think we almost have to treat that as like a bubble. And Kurt was like a world leader inside that bubble. That's why you're seeing people from around the world, people who, were, whether YouTube or other, TikTok, whatever, fans of his, come out, because it's almost some strange combination of, like, if something happened to like Mr. Beast, which I'm not a follower of these people, but I know who they are. And that person was, also political at the same time, and very sharp with the conversation, in the younger world, which is snarky and talk a lot of smack and so on. And I did see one thing very strange this last week, which is Kurt, Vance, others in that generation, and Kurt and Vance is barely in that generation, but Kirk especially, he loved that he was parodied on South Park. It was not just, it was on brand to begin with, but it was also, it showed that he sort of hit the zeitgeist, right? That it's sort of like you made it, right? And it's way bigger than getting an award. And there's a strange dynamic, because they took down the episode, which I understand, because, especially in the world we're in, a whole bunch of people would say, look, the liberal media just enjoys, blah, 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 what they said. So my guess is, if he could communicate to people still, he would say, don't take that episode down. That'd probably be what I would say. But it speaks to the fact that he was in a separate bubble than regular conversation. And I do think that intersected with the 24 election. If Trump wasn't running, and let's just say he wasn't around, like he wasn't able to run, it didn't happen in 24. Do I think Kurt has a influence at some level? Yeah, sure. But I think he stays to kind of his
Right.
world.
We don't see Kirk in
That's right. So
what's her name?
Loomer?
Haley.
Oh, yeah.
What's her name?
So there is this,
Kid.
yeah.
North
So there is this
Carolina.
parallel world that he operated in, and I think that's
Nikki
hard
Haley.
for people
Yeah.
to see who are not students right now or aren't just adjacent to that world. That's why you see moms or parents talking about him,
Right.
because he was this strange mix of a Mr. Beast and all the kind of personalities they
Yeah.
follow.
Aaron,
And
let me move on all right, because I want to get Evan in. Thanks, Aaron. That was great. Evan, come on in, and Evan will be our last speaker on our recording and our live stream, and then I'm gonna say some comments, and then I'll pass it over to Alan to be the host if anybody wants to stay in and talk. Go ahead, Evan.
Okay, so a couple things. Professor Kenyon, my exposure to Charlie was kind of similar to yours. I'd be looking up some kind of things and then on shorts, and then there'd be 5,000 Charlie Kirk interactions with college students that I just got a kick out of because I loved seeing the little triggered liberal stereotypical college students, getting pummeled intellectually. And I just enjoyed that. But I was going to say about, and Dan, I know Dan's posted a bunch of things that Charlie said. And one thing people shouldn't do is try and, he said what he said. That people shouldn't apologize for it. He has his opinions, some of which, frankly, I happen to agree with and some I don't. But what I liked about Charlie is similar to what I like about Halperin. And that is, I like people who speak in a reasoned tone, rational tone, accept dialogue, and don't lose their mind. And there's nothing I enjoyed more, I shouldn't say that, but you get my point. When a little triggered kid would come up to the microphone, you're a racist, you're a homophobe, you're a piece of garbage, you're this, you're that. And Charlie would just respond, would you like to speak? Would you like to have a conversation? And that, if you go through the chat in any of the shows that we all participate with, you see how the chat is proof that we're not going to be able to come together. It's right there. That all being said, I find that his tone was on many levels, was more important than what he said, because that's the important example. The example is, let's talk. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm wrong. But at least let's ratchet down the hostility so that we can hear each other's positions. And frankly, it's what I found appealing about Charlie Kirk. It's what I currently find appealing about Mark Halperin. It also, interestingly, when Mark Halperin turns around and calls somebody a moron, it's almost hysterical because you have more credibility when normally you're running flatline, and then all of a sudden you turn around and you say someone's a knucklehead. But that was it. I feel for people who are as affected as Alan are. And I applaud people who actually are smart enough to talk to their kids and recognize the impact it has on kids, which frankly, whether you support Charlie Kirk or not, is a tribute to Charlie Kirk, right? Just that. So the number of kids that I know of who seem apolitical, but knew about Charlie Kirk and were impacted by this is something. So that was it. So,
Yep. Thanks for coming in, Evan. I'm glad you came in. Thanks so much. All right, so I'm going to finish up talking, and then I'm going to pass it over to Alan, and you guys, the rest of you guys, can come in. Just remember, this is my show. Don't everybody be civil to each other and, agree to disagree if we have different opinions. So one thing I do want to bring up, and I did bring it up previously, not today, but this is an assassination by a 20-something-year-old COVID kid. That's what I call these kids. The kid who shot Trump's a COVID kid. This kid's a COVID kid and video gamer. I don't think we don't have all the information yet. People are trying to point, well, he was on the right, he was on the left. I think a lot of that is overblown and almost ridiculous. Andres, my little tidbit with you, my little test with you is like, why is a 31-year-old debating 20-year-old kids? That's a fair argument, but I would argue, well, who else is going to do it? And plus he's so smart. Charlie was so smart. And plus, don't forget that was his brand, and as Kelly said, he started when he was 18. Yeah, I don't know if he's gonna. Because listen, I like to debate my students, and I'm 61 years old, but I like to debate them because I want to hear what they have to say. I'm not interested in defeating them with my argument. In fact, I don't. I wouldn't even. I would say it's more about engaging in discussion. But getting back to this assassination, I think it's going to be something that Aaron and I have talked about in the past. It's just some crazy kid with some manifesto that is totally incoherent. And, I think it's more, this kid dropped out of college. He had a scholarship. He dropped out. I just think it's these wayward kids that are lost. They're lost in their own way they see themselves in the world, and they go off the deep end, and they don't understand that not only have they ruined Charlie Kirk's life, his wife's life, his kid's life, he's ruined his own life, he's ruined his own family. So I think that's really what this is about in the big term. So that'll be my final comments. I want to thank everybody for coming on. I want to thank my panelists, Andres, Alan, and Ribbon. Thank you, Ribbon, for sitting in today. I appreciate it. And thanks for bringing your good insight. So we'll meet again next Sunday at 9:30, but you guys can keep it going. I'm going to make Alan the host now. And Alan, you could choose to let everybody unmute themselves. I'm going to stop recording. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy football Sunday. That's why I got to get out of here. And I will talk to you guys. I'll see you tomorrow, I guess, for the post show. So, okay.
Yeah.
Can I say something real quick with Aaron, what he had said about Charlie Kirk and his age? I don't think it mattered how old Charlie Kirk was. He was connecting with those college students, and he was living by the example that they were looking at going, and he was setting a good example for him to follow. And I think that was enough for those young people who were looking for leaderships, of showing them set an example for them, and they did, and he connected with them. So he could have been 31 or 35. I think Obama connected with the youth when he was